Well, it's been a really grueling and exciting year, and we have had the fortune of having two amazing attorneys working on different things and sometimes the same things. And Al, our attorney from San Diego, has just been wonderful. If you haven't read our briefs, you should. They're entertaining. They don't get the general rate case actually got a little bit in the weeds, but this one you could understand everything on, and it's really interesting. So, if you haven't read them, they're available on our webpage and easy to read, and you'll kind of know what's going on. But even easier than that is having someone tell us. Yes. So Al is going to present an update of what's going on, and then I will introduce John. Al, pass everyone.
Thank you. Al, if you can stand it back a little further where Rochelle was. Thanks. There you go.
On that X.
Is there like a trap door?
Is he okay? No.
Got it?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. You're probably tired of seeing me. That means that we've been doing this for almost 3 years. And I keep wanting to tell you that we're done. Is that better?
He's being filmed.
Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So where things stand, if you're under the age of 40, you probably aren't going to get this. But remember in the old days where televisions had those two little things, the rabbit ears that you would move around in order to make the picture better? That's kind of where we are. We're getting a better picture, but it's still a little fuzzy. Where we stand now with the Public Utilities Commission is we have a proposed decision by the administrative law judge who heard this case, and he is recommending that Diablo Canyon be retired no later than 2024-2025 when the current reactor operating licenses expire. So we have made a lot of headway on that one specific issue. There are 4 or 5 other conditions that PG&E negotiated with several parties that the administrative law judge is denying. And that creates a lot of fog for those of us in this case. PG&E has indicated, because they've made promises about all of these terms and conditions to their other partners in this project, the county, the school districts, the employees' unions, that in the event the PUC doesn't approve all the terms and conditions, we would all get back into a negotiating room and try to decide what to do next. So if the administrative law judge's order goes out as written and all these other terms and conditions get rejected, we may be looking at another 6 months of litigation before a final order in this case finally issues. But the 3 big issues that we're grappling with right now and where things stand is we're going to be meeting with commissioners over the next week or 2 to discuss them. The administrative law judge will not issue an order requiring PG&E to replace Diablo Canyon with greenhouse gas-free resources. That has upset a lot of the environmental groups that signed on to the deal. The ALJ has rejected the idea that employees ought to be paid a retention bonus to stick around until the plant finally closes. That's, of course, upset the unions and some of the employee groups. And finally, the local jurisdictions, the county, the 7 cities, and some of the school districts had asked for restitution and reparations payments, and these payments would be used to sort of ease the transition until the plant closes, and would provide them with revenues to replace the tax revenues that would be lost as PG&E closed the plant. The administrative law judge rejected that proposal as well. So these are fairly significant terms and conditions. I am a little concerned about what PG&E and the other parties will do. But so far, the one enduring thing that has happened in this case is that A4NR has gotten its position approved, and that is to have the plant closed no later than the operating licenses expire in 24-25. During the case, and this just happened within the last 4 or 5 months, we got a fairly significant set of concessions on the rate side. PG&E agreed to waive cost recovery through rates of about $40 million associated with the project to replace or to extend the operating licenses. So they've been working on that since 2008, 2009, and they'd accumulated almost $60 million in costs. They've agreed that they will simply eat $40 million of that. And because the plant's going to be closed in 24-25, they're now also looking at all of the projects they were going to do to rehabilitate, repair, and maintain the plant beyond 24-25, and they're likely to cancel those projects. And again, I can't tell you what the number is because those were discussed in a private meeting, but this is fairly significant, and they are going to waive cost recovery for a good amount of the costs associated with the projects they intend to cancel. They also gave us a promise that if they overrun their budgets on any capital projects that have been approved by the PUC over the last 5 or 6 years, they will waive any cost recovery for the cost overruns unless they can demonstrate that it was reasonable to overrun the cost and it was pretty much beyond their control. So those are the things we've been working on over the last 6 months. I hope by this time next year we will be done, this will be behind us, and we'll be proceeding to an orderly retirement of the plant in 6 or 7 years.
Al's just done a terrific job. It's really been an education for me to look at rate cases in other ways. But we're not only doing Diablo Canyon. The Alliance pledged to work on the nuclear plants in California. So John has spent a great deal of time with the leftover problems, which are pretty costly at San Onofre, but also working on decommissioning. And so John's going to give an update on our other projects.
Let me address the spent fuel question at Diablo first, because it does represent one of the small victories that we had this year. We participated in the Public Utilities Commission proceeding having to do with PG&E's decommissioning plan at Diablo Canyon, and persuaded the administrative law judge and the commission to agree to expand the study that PG&E is supposed to do pursuant to the agreement that they entered into with us in their general rate case last year about accelerating the transfer of spent fuel rods to dry casks. Last year in the general rate case, they agreed that they would review with the Energy Commission accelerating that transfer during decommissioning and do so in a manner that was consistent with the recommendations the California Energy Commission has been making since 2008 to get the rods into casks as quickly as possible, subject to NRC safety requirements. This year, we persuaded the Commission to require PG&E to expand that study to include accelerating that transfer before decommissioning. There was no reason not to conduct that acceleration process while the plant was still operating. That's certainly been the Energy Commission's recommendation since 2008, and there is no good argument. There are a number of we don't want to do it arguments, but there is no good argument as to why PG&E should not proceed in that direction. In the year ahead, we will be participating at the California Energy Commission as PG&E submits its plan and the Energy Commission reviews it. Now, the Energy Commission, after I left in 2007, adopted the recommendation in 2008 that all of the state's nuclear plants ought to try to put their spent fuel rods in dry casks as quickly as they could, consistent with NRC requirements. None of the utilities were willing to do that. It stonewalled the Energy Commission for 7 or 8 years until San Onofre prematurely closed, and all of a sudden Southern California Edison got religion and said, we're going to take the program. We're going to accelerate the deposit of spent fuel rods into dry casks as quickly as we can, consistent with NRC safety requirements. So PG&E is now under CPUC order to at least accomplish Edison's timetable in terms of that transfer. Edison intends to have completed the transfer 7 years after the plant shut down. So from PG&E's standpoint, the rule of thumb would be fuel that has spent at least 5 years cooling off in the pools would be subject to that accelerated transfer. And I suspect that's what the Energy Commission is likely to hold them to. I spent most of the rest of my time this past year, other than providing expert testimony in the Diablo case, on San Onofre. And it's a little bit frustrating because I can't really tell you a lot about that. The commission ordered all of the parties in December because of a petition that we had filed to challenge the San Onofre settlement. The commission ordered all of the parties in December, several years after we'd filed our petition, to enter into a confidential meet and confer process to see if we couldn't work out improvements to the settlement. Now, I have to tell you, as a former public servant, this confidential stuff is bullshit. It is not the way the public process should be conducted, but there's little about the way the CPUC operates that is consistent with the way one would like to think the public process is conducted. And in defense of the commission in this instance, the administrative law judge didn't know what else to do and simply said, well, you know, we're not ready to jump back into this. Maybe you guys can figure out an improvement, so conduct a confidential process. So we did that. We later retained a mediator because we thought that we were probably getting to the point where a professional mediator might help us resolve any remaining differences. And in the case where the ratepayers were ordered to take 70% of the liability for a plant that malfunctioned, and which many of us believe Southern California Edison negligently allowed to malfunction, 70% is a big number. $3.4 billion in 2014 dollars were stuck to the ratepayers, and we've been trying to get some significant piece of that back. So we engaged a mediator, a very prominent gentleman in Orange County, who, if any of you had seen The Good Wife, the story about the attorney that is married to, I guess it was the state's attorney in Chicago, who was sent to jail, and she stood by him. It's kind of a Mike Peavy contemporaneous situation. This mediator actually turns out to be the father of the son, Josh, in The Good Wife. And Josh never made an appearance in our mediation. We conducted it for, probably 3 or 4 months until August of last year, or this past August, and agreed that we just weren't likely to get it resolved by the deadline the commission had set for us. The commission had allowed us to extend the deadline to August 15th. We couldn't get there. And of course, in that situation, both sides to a negotiation likely have ulterior motives to call a timeout. And we certainly felt that strategically we would be well served by a timeout. when the mediation broke up in August, all of the parties filed statements with the commission explaining their positions. And the commission in October said, well, we're going to get back into litigating this case. And these are the 8 issues that we're going to focus on. So if you've got issues to add to that, let us know. And the 8 issues, to our great satisfaction, tracked everyone that we had previously raised, with one significant exception, which we suggested also be included, and that's whether or not Edison defrauded their ratepayers with respect to the marketing of unspent fuel by including in their estimate of the market value some spent fuel. We're waiting now to see what the commission wants to do. The ball's in the commission's court. They're supposed to issue a scoping order any day now that will drive a process that they've committed to resolve sometime in 2018. So I think that next year we will hopefully have a clear sense of where things lie, both with Diablo Canyon and with Onofre, and we'll be well onto the decommissioning issues raised by both plants. As many of you know, in both plants there are questions of cask design, cask selection. That is an issue that the NRC has preempted, in which the Public Utilities Commission might have been able to get involved with a couple of years ago on the basis of cost, but it chose to punt and said, well, no, this is entirely a federal matter. We don't have a say on cask design. So that's not one of the issues the Alliance has chosen to pursue. We focused much more on getting spent fuel into casks on the premise that the Union of Concerned Scientists and others nationally have made a major point of, which is even the worst cask is a lot better than the best pool. This coming month, PG&E should release its site-specific seismic evaluation of dry casks versus wet pools at Diablo Canyon. Several years ago, that issue was taken up nationally on the basis of a study that had been done at the Peach Bottom plant in the eastern United States. And many felt that that didn't really relate to the seismically unique settings here in California. San Onofre closed, so it got itself out of any review there, but the NRC did say that for the other western plants, they would require a site-specific seismic review by the end of 2017. And PG&E has recently said that they believe that they will have that report done either in December or January. They will also have the seismic review and hopefully any retrofit requirements that they expect are necessary to the plant itself in order to conform with what the NRC calls current nuclear standards, which, at least when they were announced in 2013, were intended to be the standards that would apply to a new plant. We'll see in April whether PG&E's report properly addresses those retrofit requirements or not. But both subjects, the seismic evaluation of spent fuel pools and any potential seismic retrofit requirements, are likely to loom fairly large in the 2020 PG&E general rate case.